Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I never expected my first home to be anything more than a quiet, practical space, just somewhere to land after years of bouncing between rentals. I was 29, single, and working full-time as a medical billing coordinator. For nearly 6 years, I saved every spare cent I could, scraping by in low-rent apartments with bad plumbing and paper-thin walls. Finally, I had enough scraped together for a down payment on a modest 2-bedroom house in a sleepy suburb outside Chattanooga, Tennessee. It wasn't much to look at: faded aluminum siding, overgrown hedges strangling the porch, and a roof that sagged in one corner like it was tired. But it was mine. Mine. That counted for more than I'd realized. My parents drove down from Kentucky the weekend I moved in. They helped me unload the U-Haul, stocked my fridge with basics, milk, eggs, deli meat, and then headed back home before nightfall. That Sunday evening, I stood in my living room surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and dust motes swirling in the sunset light, a frozen pizza warming in the oven, and thought, this is it. This is mine. This is home. I took the next week off work to settle in. Most of it was spent unpacking, scrubbing windows, and assembling IKEA furniture with blistered palms and stubborn Allen wrenches. I made it a point to meet the neighbors. Most were older folks who waved from their porches but didn't press for small talk. There was Mrs. Harlow, a kindly widow with stooped shoulders and a gentle drawl, who brought over warm banana bread wrapped in wax paper. Then across the street were Caleb and Trish, a younger couple with a baby girl and a labradoodle. They invited me to a backyard barbecue that first Saturday, where we drank beer under string lights while the baby cooed in a swing. The neighborhood had that kind of calm where everyone waved and smiled but kept a polite distance. It was comforting. Safe. All except for the house at the end of the block. Something about it was off. The paint peeled in jagged strips like it was trying to shed its skin. The lawn was knee-high with weeds. Newspapers curled and yellowed on the front steps. One gutter hung loose, swaying in the wind like a broken limb. I figured it was abandoned or owned by someone too old or too sick to keep up with it. That was what I thought, until I saw someone come out of it. It was around 9:30 p.m. on a Wednesday night during my first week. I was halfway through folding laundry when a knock echoed from the front door. Not a doorbell, just a knock. Slow and spaced out. 3 deliberate thuds. I froze. I hadn't invited anyone. The porch light was off. I padded to the peephole, heart ticking faster than I liked. There was a man standing there. Mid-50s maybe, a little bald on top, but with a grizzled gray beard and a flannel shirt that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. He stood slightly hunched, like his spine carried years of weight. He caught sight of me peeking and smiled. Not a threatening smile, but not warm either. Just tired. "Hey there," he said, voice raspy but polite. "Sorry to bug you so late. Name's Carl. I live just down at the end. You're new here, huh?" I opened the door halfway, leaving the screen locked and one hand on the frame. "Yeah," I said, cautious but trying to be civil. "Just moved in last week." He nodded, glancing over my shoulder like he was cataloging the space. "Welcome. Place used to belong to Peggy Simmons. Nice lady. Died about 2 years ago. Good to see someone finally moved in." "Thanks," I replied. I started easing the door closed subtly, but he raised a hand. "Look," he said. "Hate to ask, but I'm in a bit of a bind. My water got shut off today, billing issue. You mind filling this for me?" He held up a blue mop bucket, the kind you'd see in janitor closets. It was strange, sure, but he looked worn down more than dangerous, and I'd been raised to help your neighbors if you could. Still, something twisted in my gut. "Yeah, I guess I can do that," I said. "Hang on." I filled it in the tub and had to lean with both arms to lug it back. When I handed it to him, he smiled again, said thank you, and shuffled off down the sidewalk. That should have been the end of it. But over the next few nights, it turned into something else. The next evening, another knock. This time he asked if I had extra canned food. The one after that, he claimed his flashlight batteries had died and asked if I had any spares. Then, at nearly midnight on Friday, he showed up with blood on his hand, muttering something about a fence nail, asking if I had any bandages. Each time he looked a little rougher, hair more tangled, clothes more rumpled, dirt under his nails, dark circles like bruises under his eyes, the same flannel shirt, like he hadn't changed, and the way he talked, too casual, too familiar, like we were old friends, like this was normal. It stopped sitting right with me. I started fibbing, told him I was out of canned goods, didn't have the right batteries, that I was already in bed and couldn't help. Eventually, I just stopped answering the door. I'd sit on the couch, lights dimmed, heart beating like a trapped animal every time the knocking started. Sometimes it came at 10, other times closer to 1 in the morning, but it always came. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, always spaced with eerie precision. Tap, 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 like a metronome counting down to something I didn't want to face. I kept telling myself it wasn't worth worrying about, but the rhythm got stuck in my head like it meant something. I thought about talking to someone, maybe Mrs. Harlow or even Caleb across the street. But what would I even say? My neighbor asked for canned food. Now he knocks too much? It sounded ridiculous. Until that Wednesday night. It was just before midnight, and I was half asleep on the couch when I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. I groaned, dragged myself to the door, not even planning to open it. But then I looked through the peephole. Carl's face was right there, but different this time, panic-stricken. His eyes were wide and glassy, and his chest rose and fell like he'd just sprinted a mile. Despite the dread tightening in my stomach, I unlocked the deadbolt and cracked the door. "Carl?" I asked cautiously. He looked over his shoulder like someone might be following him. Then back at me. "Sorry. Look, sorry to bother you this late," he said quickly, voice trembling. I got this new propane grill, you know. I think I hooked it up wrong. I smell gas, I don't know. Can you just come take a quick sniff? I just need someone to tell me if it smells weird." I blinked, still trying to register what he was saying. "You want me to come to your house right now?" "I wouldn't ask," he said, hands up in reassurance. "But I really don't want to blow the place up or something. I mean, just a quick look. I don't trust my own nose anymore." Everything in me screamed no. My instincts flared like a fire alarm. But guilt crept in under the fear. What if it really was a gas leak? What if something happened and I could have stopped it? "Okay," I said after a long pause. "Give me a minute. I'll come over." I went inside, pulled on my shoes, and grabbed my phone. For a moment I stared at the kitchen drawer and seriously considered taking a knife with me. But that felt crazy. Instead, I slid my phone into my hoodie pocket and stepped outside. Carl's house was dark. The yard looked worse up close. Broken lawn chairs, a busted-down grill full of leaves, and a plastic kiddie pool warped by sun damage. His front door was wide open, swinging just slightly in the breeze. "Out back," he called from inside. "It's in the yard." I followed the side gate into the backyard, treading cautiously. Dirt, patches of weeds, a tipped-over wheelbarrow. No grill, no propane tank. "Carl?" I called, slowing my steps. "Yeah, I'm down here," he shouted, his voice echoing faintly from inside the house. "Moved it into the basement. Wanted to keep it safe. Come help me carry it up." The word basement made my stomach clench. I stepped closer to the open back door. Inside, it was pitch black. No ambient glow, no flickering light from deeper inside. Just darkness. "You got a light in there?" I asked, staying outside the threshold. "Nah. Switch broke a while ago. Just come on. I'm right down here." I didn't move. My breath caught. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. "Carl," I said slowly, backing up a step. I think I'm gonna head back. If it smells like gas, I'll call someone for you. Okay?" Silence. Then, thump, thump, thump. Sprinting footsteps, coming up the basement stairs. I turned and ran. Full sprint. I barely felt the gate slam against my side as I flew down the block, heart pounding, shoes slapping the pavement. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My only thought was, get inside. Get inside. Get inside. I burst through my front door, slammed it shut, locked both deadbolts, then ran to the back and did the same. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I had and stood behind the curtain, peering out through a tiny opening. Nothing. Not a single movement. No footsteps. No shadow crossing the lawn. I watched for half an hour. Maybe longer. My hands didn't stop shaking. I didn't sleep at all that night. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I even tell them? My neighbor invited me to his house, then ran at me in the dark. The next few days passed without a sound. No knocks, no sign of Carl. Finally, that weekend, I worked up the courage to ask Mrs. Harlow about him. We were chatting near the mailbox, and I tried to sound casual. Hey, the guy down at the end, Carl, I think? He's, the one who lives in the rundown place? Her face twisted in confusion. Carl? She said. Sweetheart, nobody lives in that house. Hasn't for a while now. I stared at her, stunned. What? That place has been empty since old Pete passed, she said. Almost 2 years ago. No one's bought it. Why? I felt my stomach drop. I've talked to someone. He said he lives there. She frowned, concern flickering across her face. Honey, that place doesn't even have electricity. Or water. Someone might have been squatting, maybe. But I haven't seen a soul. And I walk my dog past there every day. I told her everything. About the knocks, the weird requests, the basement. She called the police. They searched the house that afternoon. There was nothing inside. No furniture, no food, no clothes, no grill. The back door still hung open like I'd left it. But in the basement, they found deep gouges in the concrete walls. Scrape marks, long and jagged like something had clawed at the surface over and over again. I moved out 2 weeks later. I still don't know who or what that man was. I don't know what was really in that basement. But every now and then when I'm lying awake in some new apartment far away, I hear it again in my head. 3 slow knocks. And I wonder how long he'd been watching me before he ever knocked the first time. I was desperate. That's really where this started. Desperation has this way of dulling your judgment, makes red flags look like decorations when they're the only things moving in the wind. I was broke, exhausted, and running out of time. It was the summer before my sophomore year of college, and I'd just lost the housing lottery. No dorms for second years unless you had some medical excuse, which I didn't. So I was back in Deerfield, my sleepy, sun-scorched hometown in the Midwest, trying to figure out where the hell I'd live when school started again. Deerfield's the kind of place that's charming in autumn, when the leaves light up and the air smells like bonfires. But in the summer, it's brutal. Heavy, still air. Mosquitoes thick enough to blur your vision. My school, Emerson Valley University, was only a 40-minute drive away, but their off-campus housing market might as well have been in a major city. Every decent apartment was either rotting or way out of my price range. I had maybe enough from working at the local movie theater all year to cover a deposit, but rent, month to month? Not a chance on my own. So I did what any hopeful, slightly naive 19-year-old would do. I posted an ad. I dropped it in the Emerson Classifieds and Craigslist. Looking for roommate ASAP. Quiet, responsible student looking to split rent on a 2-bedroom within walking distance of campus. Clean, non-smoker, serious about school. Message if interested. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest. I posted it at 9:23 p.m., then wandered into the kitchen to boil some water for instant noodles. By 10:01 I had a reply. Her name was Elaine Barrett. Her message was brief, formal almost, but polite. She said she was recently retired, needed a smaller place after her husband passed away last year. That part made me pause. She said she was 71. I read that line twice. 71? But there was something kind in the way she wrote. She wasn't pushy. She said she liked the quiet, liked students, promised she wouldn't be a bother. She offered to split rent without hesitation. I didn't get any other replies that week. By early September, I had signed the lease. A small brick duplex 5 blocks from campus. It wasn't fancy. The floors creaked, the blinds had yellowed from the sun, and the plumbing made noises like it was clearing its throat. But it was clean, calm. Out front, there was a porch with a railing that leaned slightly, and a massive oak tree that cast this dappled shade over the living room windows. Elaine moved in the same day I did. I remember it clearly because she only brought 2 things, a box and a wheeled suitcase. She smiled at me and said, "I don't believe in clutter." Her voice was soft, warm, but not weak. She was maybe 5'1", thin, but there was a steadiness to her. Her white hair was always pulled back into a neat, tight bun. She wore long skirts and cardigans, even when the humidity made me feel like I was swimming through the air, and she smelled like lavender, clean, old-fashioned soap. She chose the smaller room in the back of the house, left me the front one with the bay window, said it suited a student better. She told me she didn't watch TV, mostly kept to herself, liked books and puzzles. She was, honestly, the ideal roommate. The first few weeks went by quietly. I'd come home from class, fix dinner, and maybe hear her in the hallway heading to the bathroom or pouring hot water for tea. Occasionally, she'd pass through the kitchen while I was eating and say something simple like, "Smells good," or "Long day." Always gentle, always polite. Then things began to shift. So subtly at first, I questioned if anything was wrong at all. The first strange thing was the laughter. It happened on a Tuesday. I was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, working on a paper with my laptop propped on a stack of textbooks. Around 10 o'clock I heard it, this faint giggling, high-pitched, delicate, almost like a little girl's. At first I smiled, assuming maybe she was on the phone with a friend or a grandkid, but it kept going. There was no back and forth, no voices in reply, just these short, airy bursts of laughter, like someone reacting to a private joke. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. Each time always the same, quiet, breathy giggles from behind her door. Not a full conversation, not even a single word spoken out loud. Just those odd little laughs, like she was watching something unfold in her mind. Something no one else could see. I'd be doing homework or watching something on my laptop, earbuds in, lights low, and I'd hear it, through the wall. That same giggling, always the same sound. No murmurs, no conversations, no movement. Just that one, light, high-pitched laugh, like something delighted but far away from reason. It didn't sound evil, exactly, just wrong. Too soft, too steady. It made my skin crawl in that way you can't quite explain, like your body knows something your brain doesn't. But it wasn't quite strange enough to bring up. Not yet. The next thing was her staring. It started subtly. I'd be stretched out on the couch, flipping through notes or half watching something dumb, and I'd feel it. That quiet tickle at the back of my neck. I'd look up, and there she'd be. Elaine. Standing just at the edge of the hallway where the light didn't quite reach. Half-shadowed, hands folded gently at her waist like she was posing for a photo. She never said a word. Just stood there, still as a painting, with this faint, vague smile that never touched her eyes. At first I thought maybe she wanted to chat or ask something, so I'd say, "Hey, Elaine," kind of awkwardly. But she wouldn't respond. Not really. She'd just nod once, slow and stiff, then turn back down the hall and disappear. By mid-October, it wasn't subtle anymore. The mood of the house had changed. The air felt heavier, like the walls were listening. What started off as a strange, quiet living situation with an eccentric older woman had started to feel like I was sharing space with something I couldn't understand, and maybe shouldn't. Then came the night of the tapping. It was around 3 a.m. I I remember because I woke up mid-dream, heart hammering, and I didn't know why at first. Then I heard it. A soft, delicate tapping on my bedroom door. Not knocking, not aggressive, just light taps, like fingernails on wood. Too quiet to wake someone normally, almost like it wasn't meant to. I sat up slowly, eyes wide in the dark. My room was cold, too cold, and I held my breath, straining to hear. The tapping kept going, precise, measured, almost playful. "Elaine?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The tapping stopped. Silence. Then, giggling. That same high-pitched, airy laugh right on the other side of the door. Every muscle in my body locked up. My mouth went dry. I didn't move for what felt like hours. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at the door, heart in my throat, praying she wouldn't try the handle. My door didn't have a lock. The next morning, I waited until I heard the kettle click off in the kitchen. I forced myself to walk out there, acting casual even though I hadn't slept a second. She stood at the stove, stirring her tea like nothing had happened. "Hey, I started, voice too light. "Were you up last night? Around 3 or so." She looked up with that same calm smile. "Oh no, dear. I went to bed early, must have been around 9. I nodded, trying to keep my expression blank. "Huh. I thought I heard someone tapping on my door." Her smile widened, slow, deliberate. "Dreams can be very loud, can't they?" I stared at her for a second too long, then nodded. "Yeah, guess so." That was the last time I tried to confront her. That night, I shoved my desk in front of the door. It wasn't heavy, but it was better than nothing. I wasn't willing to take chances anymore. At 3:12 a.m., I woke again. This time it wasn't tapping. It was the doorknob, jiggling. Someone was trying to open the door. I didn't move, just watched the handle twitch back and forth in slow, deliberate turns. I held my breath as the desk creaked slightly under the pressure of soft pushes against the door. It wasn't forceful, yet, just enough to make it clear that someone out there was testing it. Then it stopped. I waited. Then I saw it. An eye, just barely visible in the narrow sliver between the door and the frame. It was hers, Elaine's. She was watching me through the gap, unmoving. And then she screamed. A shrill, raw, guttural scream, like it had been ripped from her lungs. She screamed my name, over and over, followed by words I couldn't make out. Then suddenly, "You shouldn't be here!" She slammed against the door. Over and over. The desk jolted forward each time with a deep, wooden thud. I scrambled from my bed, threw my shoulder against it, shouting, "Stop! Elaine! What the hell? Stop!" She didn't. She just kept screaming, hitting the door, pounding her fists or something against it. Then silence. I don't remember calling the police. I just remember my voice shaking when I answered the dispatcher. There's a woman trying to break into my room. Please hurry." They arrived about 10 minutes later. I opened the door slowly and nearly threw up. Every knife from our kitchen, every last one, had been stabbed into the door. Steak knives, the bread knife, even the little paring one we used for apples. Some were sunk in deep. Others barely clung to the wood, wobbling slightly in place. My door looked like a pin cushion made of steel and madness. Elaine didn't come out of her room. One of the officers knocked gently. The other stayed by me, asking questions while I tried to make sense of it all. I told them everything. Her staring, the laughter, the tapping, the screaming. I didn't even know if I sounded sane. When they finally opened her door, she fought them. Not with strength exactly, but with sheer chaotic fury, screaming about demons and voices and blood in the walls. She didn't look at me once. They had to restrain her to get her out. I moved out by the end of the month. Found a small apartment across town with 2 other students. It was cramped. The kitchen was a joke. But it felt like heaven. We split rent 3 ways, and every night I locked my door without fear. I never saw Elaine again. A week after I moved, one of the officers called to follow up. He sounded tired. She didn't have any next of kin, he said. No records, no medical history. The name on her ID, Elaine Barrett, doesn't exist. Not in this state, not anywhere. Your landlord said she replied to his Craigslist ad, paid everything in cash. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I don't know who she was, or what she wanted, but I will never forget the look in her eye through that crack in the door. Like she wasn't just watching me, like she was waiting. In the beginning, it was just a creak, nothing unusual for a terrace house that had been standing since the late 1800s. Barfield wasn't the kind of town people remembered. It was the sort of place you drove through without noticing. Rows upon rows of tired red brick homes, pressed close together like books on a forgotten shelf. Their back gardens were divided by leaning fences and rusted sheds that looked one gust away from collapse. The chimneys were crooked, the windows misaligned like eyes that had seen too much. Right in the middle of it all stood 27 Bridgewater Lane. That was home. I lived there for 3 years. I'd moved in after a breakup that had split me clean down the center. I wanted space. Quiet. Mostly, I needed somewhere cheap. The rent was low enough to overlook the quirks, the threadbare carpet, a fireplace that hadn't sparked in decades, and the damp patch by the front window that stubbornly refused to dry. Still, it was mine. My name's Grace Holloway. I was 28 when it started. I worked admin at a small medical supply company, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Nothing special. My dog, Luna, a black lab with soulful eyes, was my anchor. After the breakup, my circle shrank, but honestly, I didn't miss the noise. Bridgewater Lane was quiet, full of retirees, young couples trying to make it work, and a handful of people like me. Except for Robert. He lived next door at 29. Mid-40s, balding, and always in these hand-knit cardigans. Thick and ugly, even in the heat of July. Never once saw him with a friend or even a delivery. He didn't seem to work either. I'd see him some afternoons, sitting on the front step with a cigarette dangling from yellow-stained fingers, just watching people pass. Not in a bored or idle way, more like he was taking mental notes, observing, studying. We exchanged nods when we crossed paths, but I never pushed for more. There was something about him. Not just his appearance, it was the way his gaze stuck just a second too long. The way his lips would twitch into a smile when no one else was watching. The first few weeks went by without much to note. But around the 5th week, strange things started happening. Small things at first. It began in the bathroom. The ceiling above the tub creaked every now and then. Not alarming, more like the subtle shift of weight or something adjusting. Just an occasional muffled thump or the soft scuffle of movement. I figured birds had gotten into the roof or maybe a squirrel. The place was old after all. There was an attic hatch in the hallway just outside the bathroom. I'd popped it open once when I first moved in, curious. All I saw were dusty rafters, loose insulation, some old plumbing and cobwebs. I hadn't bothered since. Then one night I remember it too clearly. I was soaking in the tub after a long shift, candles flickering on the rim, steam curling up the mirror. Luna was curled outside the bathroom door, dozing. Everything felt warm and still. And then, creak. A gentle shift above me, just enough to make me freeze. Then nothing. Luna's low growl broke the silence. My heart thudded in my chest. I sat up, listening. Probably just a pigeon, I whispered, trying to sound casual, even to myself. But my voice felt thin in the heavy air. The next day, I asked my friend Adam to come check it out. He was always game for that kind of thing. He showed up with a flashlight, climbed halfway up the ladder and shone the beam across the attic. "Nothing up there, Grace," he called down. "Just cobwebs and a few existential regrets." I laughed, genuinely. He came down, wiped his hands, and that was that. I let it go. Weeks passed. Then came a Friday night in early autumn. I'd made plans to meet some friends at the pub for a birthday, but I was running late. The shower was still fogging the mirror as I towel dried my hair, music playing softly in the bedroom. That's when Luna barked. Not the usual bark. This one was sharp, urgent, the kind of sound that grips your spine. I rushed out, dripping, towel around my shoulders, and found her in the hallway. She stood frozen, tail stiff, hackles raised, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Luna?" I asked, breath catching. "What's wrong?" She didn't budge, didn't blink. I followed her gaze. Then I heard it. Just the faintest sound above my head. A scrape. Slow. Like something heavy being dragged across wood. Not an animal. Too slow, too deliberate. The sound had a rhythm, intentional. Like someone crawling, careful not to be heard, easing their weight down beam by beam. I froze in the hallway. Every muscle locked. My breath hitched. "Shit," I whispered, fumbling for my phone with trembling fingers. I wasn't going to stick around to find out. I threw on clothes with shaking hands, grabbed Luna's leash, and texted my friend Jess. "Mind if I get ready at your place instead? I'll explain when I'm there." I whispered the whole call, barely audible, like saying the words too loud would make something come crashing down from above. It felt irrational, but my gut wouldn't quiet. Luna was already by the door, her body tense, tail down, ready to go. I didn't even lock up properly. I just left, shoes half on, heart thudding. That night, I couldn't relax. Even at Jess's place, surrounded by laughter and the warmth of people, the sound kept replaying in my head. The slow drag. The weight. I barely slept. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I stood outside watering the tiny front garden like everything was fine. It wasn't. That's when Robert spoke. "You all right?" I turned to see him standing on his doorstep, arms folded over one of those same ugly cardigans, face unreadable. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "All good, thanks." He nodded, and I turned back to the watering can. My hands were damp and cold. I started to head back inside when he added casually, "Did you make it to your friend's place in time?" I stopped, blinked, turned halfway. "Sorry?" I asked, tone light, but my pulse spiked. "Last night," he said, "I heard you say you were heading over there to get ready." I stared at him, trying to mask the chill crawling up my spine. I hadn't said it near a window. I hadn't said it outside. I'd whispered it in the hallway. No shared wall. No open vents. "Oh, yeah. I did," I said, voice thin. "Thanks." Then I turned, went inside, and locked the door. It hit me in rolling waves. How could he have known? The only answer was awful. He'd heard me from inside the house. My hands were shaking as I called my dad. I didn't even try to explain it all, just said, "Something's wrong. Please come." An hour later, my dad, uncle, and cousin pulled up. No yelling, no accusations. Not yet. Just a plan to get answers. We kept the house quiet, lights off upstairs except for the bathroom. We opened the attic hatch slowly. At first it looked like nothing. Then I saw it. 2 tiny pinholes in the ceiling positioned right above the bathtub. So small you'd never see them unless you were directly beneath. We switched off the bathroom light. Above us, the attic stayed dark, except for 2 faint pinpricks of light. Watching. My cousin climbed up first. The silence stretched. When he came down, his voice was low, steady. "The wall between your attic and Robert's, it's been busted through. Some bricks knocked in. Most of the rubble's on your side." My dad didn't hesitate. He stormed outside, crossed the narrow path, and started pounding on Robert's door. "Open up, you coward," he shouted. "Open the damn door." No answer. Whether he was gone or hiding, we didn't know. We called the police. They arrived, asked questions, climbed into the attic, examined the breach. Robert eventually returned and denied everything. Said he'd never been up there, blamed the hole on past tenants. "There's no proof," one officer told us quietly. "We can't arrest someone for creaks or gaps in the wall." But it was more than that. He knew things he couldn't have known. There were holes in my ceiling. Someone had been watching me, maybe for weeks, maybe longer. and the wall had been broken from his side. Nothing ever came of the report. The official line was inconclusive. I didn't sleep there again. That week, I moved back in with my parents. I only returned once more, to pack up my things during daylight, never alone. I never saw Robert again. 6 months later, the letting agent told me the house next door had suffered unexpected water damage in the attic. Unfit for tenants now. Even years later, in a new home in a different town, I still think about that night. What if I hadn't left? What if I'd stayed in the bath just a little longer? What if Luna hadn't barked? What if I hadn't whispered? Some nights, I dream about the sound of creaking wood overhead. And when I wake up, I check the ceiling. Every time. Because no matter how far I move or how new the house is, I never trust the attic. Not anymore. I never thought moving to another country would teach me what fear tastes like. Not just the edge of discomfort, but that cold, metallic dread you can feel on your tongue. I was 20 when the acceptance letter came through. Psychology at Newley University. I remember it vividly, running laps around my tiny bedroom in India, phone trembling in my hands, texting my best friend in all caps and exclamation marks. It wasn't just about a degree. It was escape. It was freedom. Things at home had been tense for years. My parents argued like it was their job, fights that started loud and ended in suffocating silence. Even with headphones blaring, the tension seeped through. I needed space, a new start, somewhere far enough that the air felt different. Newley wasn't some big city like London or Manchester. It was a small university town wrapped in mist and old ivy. The kind of place with buses that never ran on time and streets lined with red brick houses straight out of a BBC drama. And I loved it instantly. First year was everything I'd hoped for. I lived in student halls, shoebox rooms, grimy shared kitchens that constantly reeked of burnt toast and 2-minute noodles. That's where I met Chloe, Zoe, and Matt. We clicked right away. Nights out that bled into mornings, kitchen dance-offs, late-night breakdowns over assignments. It felt like family, but warmer, messier, better. By second year, we were ready for a place of our own. No more flats with paper-thin walls and strict curfews. We found a real house, a 2-story terrace on Ashcraft Lane, rented through student accommodation services. Our little haven sat at the very end of the row. There was a tiny backyard with an old wooden gate that groaned when you pushed it, opening into a narrow alley. A corner shop just 5 minutes away. It felt perfect. My room was on the ground floor, window facing the backyard. Small, but it had a kind of charm. I liked smoking out the window, watching squirrels chase each other along the brick walls like it was their personal playground. We had neighbors on both sides. On the left, a quiet older couple who offered polite nods and never made a sound. On the right, a group of 5 guys. Loud, rowdy, always drinking. Every Friday night, their music bled through the walls like a second heartbeat. We'd catch them in the alley sometimes, shirtless, drunk, laughing too loud. One of them, tall, buzz-cut, eyes like they'd been hollowed out, always stared too long when we passed. Kieran, we learned later. Things turned dark about 3 months into the term. It started with sirens. One night around 8 p.m., we heard screaming from the house next door. Not rowdy party yelling, but something raw and panicked. Something real. We froze. Then came the shatter of glass. A loud bang. Chloe grabbed her phone and dialed the police. I hovered by the front door, heart thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Minutes later, the street was lit up blue. Flashing lights bounced off the windows, washing our living room in flickering shadows. I stepped outside, and for a moment, it felt like we weren't standing in real life. One of the guys, mid-20s maybe, was sitting on the pavement, bleeding heavily. His shirt was torn, and a nasty bruise was blooming across his face. Another man was being shoved into a police van, cuffed, ranting nonsense. The injured guy looked like he'd left his body, eyes glazed, distant. He didn't even wince. We brought him water. Matt handed over a spare shirt. The guy just kept muttering things that didn't make sense. "It's all her fault," he said once, rocking slightly. "She talks to me through the fridge." None of us knew what to say. Then he turned his head, slow, deliberate, and locked eyes with me. "You've got kind eyes," he said, smiling wide. Too wide. That's rare around here. I forced a smile, mumbled a thank you, and stepped back into the safety of our house. The police took it from there. We thought it was over. It wasn't. I started noticing Kieran more after that night. Like really noticing. Not just hearing his music or passing him in the alley. I'd see him standing near the corner shop as if he'd been waiting, staring from across the street. He never spoke, just watched. His gaze felt like pressure on my skin. I tried brushing it off. He lived next door. Coincidences happen. Then one afternoon, I was heading to the shop for a Coke. As I rounded the corner, he appeared beside me, like he'd stepped out of thin air. "Hey," he said casually, like we'd known each other for years. "You all right?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone polite but neutral. "Good," he nodded. "We should talk sometime. Just us." I hesitated. "I'm kind of busy right now." He stopped walking. I didn't. "That's all right," he called after me. "I'll wait by your house. We can talk when you're back." My chest tightened, but I didn't turn around. I just walked faster, heart pounding louder than my footsteps. I laughed, nervously, uncertainly, thinking he had to be joking. Just some weird joke, right? But when I rounded the corner, drink in hand, my stomach dropped. There he was. Kieran. Actually waiting. And he wasn't alone. One of his flatmates was with him, both of them sitting on our doorstep like they owned it. Talking, laughing softly, like they belonged there. I didn't go back. I turned on my heel, heart pounding in my throat, and walked straight back to the shop, trying not to break into a run. My legs felt hollow, like they might fold under me at any second. I ducked into the shop's side alley, pressed my back to the cold wall, and pulled out my phone with shaking fingers. I called Matt. He was the only guy in our house, and in that moment, I needed him to be home more than anything. But of course, he wasn't. Nobody was. Just me, and two guys on the porch who wouldn't leave. I stayed near the shop for nearly an hour, watching from a distance, checking my phone every 5 minutes like it might speed time up. Eventually, they got up. Walked off down the street like nothing was strange about what they'd just done. The moment they turned the corner, I ran, sprinted home like something was chasing me. I bolted the front door the second I got inside. Every lock, every latch, even the tiny top one we never bothered with. My hand shook as I slid down to the floor, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. Through the frosted glass panel on the door, I could still see it, the smudge of a handprint left behind, like proof, like a warning. Things went quiet after that for a while. I stopped going out unless I had to, took longer routes to uni, kept my head down. Daniel, my boyfriend, started staying over more often. He lived in halls across campus, but he didn't mind the walk. I never told him the whole story, not then. Just that the guys next door were a bit off. Unpredictable. Weird. Then came the night that still makes my skin crawl. Daniel was over. We'd ordered takeout, watched a dumb comedy, and passed out around 1 in the morning. It was warm that night, warmer than usual, so I'd left my window cracked open the way I always did, just enough to let in some air. Around 3 a.m., I felt him shift beside me. Then he sat up. "Ellie," he whispered, voice low and urgent. "Wake up." I blinked in the dark, barely awake. His hand gently covered my mouth as he leaned in, nodding toward the window. "Don't move," he breathed. We stayed frozen, and then we heard it. Soft footsteps crunching in the gravel just outside. Slow, purposeful, too heavy to be an animal. Then a whisper, low, indistinct, like someone speaking just below the edge of hearing, and then, bang, The gate slammed open. We always tied it shut. Always. That sound wasn't the wind. That sound was someone untying it. My pulse thundered in my ears. We listened. The soft scrape of footsteps. Then, the delicate click of the back door handle being tried. Slowly. Like whoever was out there didn't want to be heard. Like they were testing it. Curtains drawn, lights off. We didn't move. Then, we heard it. The faint creak of my window sliding open further. I hadn't touched it. Daniel was up in a flash. He grabbed my arm and pulled me out of bed. We didn't speak. We just moved. We threw on whatever clothes we could grab and bolted. I nearly fell down the stairs in my panic, catching the banister just in time. My feet hit the front door. No shoes, no coat. I didn't care. I flung it open and we ran. I didn't stop until we reached the middle of the street, the gravel biting into my bare feet. I didn't care if I was bleeding. I just needed distance. I called the police. Daniel rang Matt. The station was close. Officers arrived within minutes. They searched the backyard, flashlights slicing through the dark. Then, behind the bins, they found someone. One of the guys from next door. Not Kieran. Another one. Crouched low. Just hiding. They arrested him. They found Kieran 2 streets over, walking calmly like he'd just stepped out for fresh air. He had his hands in his pockets and acted surprised when they approached him. The officers didn't say much, took our statements, told us to keep everything locked. Probably just drunken stupidity, they said. But I don't think drunks cut tied strings off locked gates. And I definitely don't think drunks creep through backyards at 3 a.m. and open people's windows. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Not properly. I'd wake in a cold sweat, heart pounding, convinced I'd heard something. A whisper, a footstep, a creak that shouldn't be there. I stopped using the backyard, started keeping the curtains closed all the time, even in the daylight. My coursework started slipping. I couldn't concentrate. Couldn't stop picturing what might have happened if Daniel hadn't woken up, if I'd forgotten to tie the gate, if I'd left the window even slightly more open, if we hadn't run. A few months later, I packed up early and flew back home. Told everyone I just missed my family, that I was homesick. But the truth was, I couldn't stay in that house another day. I couldn't look at Ashcraft Lane without my chest tightening. Couldn't hear footsteps behind me without feeling like someone was reaching out to grab me. Sometimes I still dream about it. The whispering, the rattle of the door handle, the creak of the window shifting without a breeze. And the worst part? I never knew why. I never said anything to them, never even looked at them funny. But still, they tried to come in, and I'll never know what they wanted. Or what might have happened if Daniel had slept a little deeper, or if I hadn't tied that gate just a little tighter. When I was 10, the world felt too big, and far too quiet. Not peaceful exactly, just empty in a way that made your skin itch if you listened too long. We lived in an old farmhouse on the edge of a sleepy little town in western Pennsylvania, tucked between rolling hills and a dense sprawl of woods that seemed to stretch forever. Our nearest neighbor was over half a mile away, and every afternoon my walk home from school meant crossing that long, lonely stretch of Maple Hollow Road, with nothing but the wind in the trees and the occasional crumbling house to keep me company. I'm Emily Saunders. Back then, it was just me, Mom, and Dad in that drafty old house with windows that rattled in the wind and floorboards that groaned like they were remembering better years. At night, I'd lie awake and listen to owls calling in the woods, or the breeze slipping through cracks in the window frames. Some people would have called it peaceful, but not me. Not really, because right next door, too close for comfort, lived Mr. Grayson. I never knew his first name, and I never asked. He was ancient, way older than my grandparents, with skin like old paper and eyes that never blinked long enough. There was something in the way he moved, the way he stood so still, that always made me feel like a rabbit spotting a snake in the grass. His house was a wreck. The windows were sprayed over with thick coats of white paint, making it impossible to see inside. His yard was a tangle of weeds, overgrown bushes, and broken limbs that no one had cleared in ages. And still, every day, when I passed by on my way home from Miller Elementary, I felt his eyes on me. "Hey, Emily," he'd say sometimes, his voice scraping out from the shadows of his porch. It wasn't a neighborly hello. It felt wrong, controlled, like he'd been practicing it. I'd grip the straps of my backpack and try to act like I hadn't heard him. Just keep walking, don't look up, don't say anything. But sometimes he'd step closer to the edge of his porch, like he was testing how far I'd go before running. "Where you going?" he asked once. "Don't want to stop and say hi?" His words always lingered too long in the air. I shook my head and picked up my pace, heart pounding so hard it felt like it was in my throat. One time I nearly tripped over a root in the sidewalk because I was too focused on his house. I couldn't help it. I kept imagining him suddenly appearing behind one of those chalky windows, his face pressed against the glass, watching me. That night at dinner, I pushed my food around without taking a bite. Mom looked over at me, frowning gently. "You're awfully quiet, sweetheart. Something happened at school?" I forced a smile and shrugged. "No, just tired." Dad set down his fork and looked at me, serious. "If that guy next door says anything weird again, you tell us, okay? We don't want you keeping that kind of thing to yourself." I nodded, but I didn't say anything. Because what if they thought I was exaggerating? Or worse, what if they told me to ignore him just like everyone else seemed to do? So, I stayed quiet. But inside, something was changing. The knot in my stomach got tighter each week. Some nights I'd lie in bed and see flickers of movement through the thin curtains of my window. Just a quick pulse of light, like someone flashing a flashlight from the woods. I knew that beam. I recognized the way it bobbed and swayed. It was him. One night I woke with a start, heart already racing. A narrow shaft of light was cutting across my room like a knife. I froze. My breath caught in my chest. I couldn't see his face, too many shadows, but I knew it was him. The way he moved, slow and measured, like he had all the time in the world, made my stomach turn. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and told myself he couldn't see much. My room was on the second floor after all. But sleep was out of the question. Then came the night I'll never forget. Summer had come, thick and heavy, and I lay in bed with the box fan humming on my dresser, trying to stay cool. That's when I saw the light again. But this time it didn't just flicker. It grew brighter, steadier, and then I heard it. A low thud against the side of the house. I knew that sound. The ladder. He had an old wooden ladder, normally propped against the side of his porch. I'd seen it dozens of times during the day. But now, at night, it wasn't just a ladder. It was a warning. Then came the knock. Soft at first, almost playful. A steady tapping against the glass right beside my head. I turned slowly, and there he was. His face was inches from mine, distorted by the glass. His eyes were wide and unblinking, his mouth twisted into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His fingers tapped rhythmically, like he was inviting me to open the window. I screamed, bolted, tore through the hallway in my bare feet and didn't stop until I was pounding on my parents' bedroom door, breath coming in gasps, voice hoarse from yelling. That night, everything changed. Mom, Dad, he was at my window, I cried, my voice shaking. My feet were ice against the hallway floor as I clutched the doorframe of their room. They were up in seconds. My dad grabbed the heavy flashlight from the dresser drawer, and my mom threw on her robe without saying a word. We rushed back to my room, their footsteps thudding behind me. The house felt colder than it should have. Outside, the yard was still. The beam of Dad's flashlight swept across the lawn and the side of the house. No ladder, no figure, just moonlight and shadows. "Are you sure it wasn't a dream?" Dad asked gently, though his eyes scanned the yard a little too carefully. "No," I said. voice barely more than a whisper. It wasn't. He was there. He was looking at me. He wanted me to open the window. Mom pulled me into her arms, rubbing my back softly, but I saw something flicker in her face. Uncertainty. Sweetheart, sometimes our imaginations, especially when we've been scared or half asleep, it can feel real, like a waking dream. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but I couldn't unsee that face at the glass. The tapping, the smile that didn't belong. Weeks later, without warning, Mr. Grayson's house went up for sale. A simple wooden sign appeared out front, half hidden by the tangled grass. The windows were still whitewashed, the curtains behind them still drawn, but the man was gone. Just gone. We never saw him move out. Never heard a truck. No goodbye. One day he was there, and then he wasn't. After that night, life returned to a strange kind of normal. The house was quiet again. Really quiet this time. But I couldn't shake the feeling. That tension in my chest. The way I checked the window lock twice, sometimes 3 times before going to bed. Even in daylight, school felt different. I'd pass his house every afternoon and glance toward the peeling paint and the crooked for sale sign, wondering, was he really gone? Or had he just moved into the shadows, watching from somewhere else? I never talked about it. Not fully. Not with anyone. I wanted to tell my parents everything. That the flashlight had returned more than once. That I knew the sound of his ladder like I knew my own heartbeat. That I had been too scared to scream, too scared to move. But the words stuck like syrup in my throat. I was afraid they'd tell me I was being dramatic, or that it had just been a nightmare, so I kept it all inside. Then one autumn morning, a moving van pulled into the driveway next door. A young couple stepped out, arms full of boxes and laughter. A boy and a girl tumbled after them, playing tag in the overgrown yard. Within a week, the windows were scrubbed clean, and the dead bushes trimmed away. Fresh paint covered the porch, and flower pots appeared on the steps. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt lived in, safe. One afternoon, I stood by our front window and watched the kids playing. Their voices carried in the breeze, bright and full of life. I should have felt happy, but all I felt was this weird, quiet guilt. Relief that he was gone. Guilt that I'd never told anyone how bad it had really been. Months later, just as winter started to settle in, I found Mom sitting on the porch swing in her thick sweater, a mug of tea cooling beside her. The sky was clear, stars scattered like glitter. I hesitated, then sat beside her, the wood creaking beneath us. "Mom," I said, staring out into the dark. "Do you remember that man who lived next door? Mr. Grayson?" She didn't answer right away. Then softly, "Yeah, I remember. That was a hard time. For all of us." I swallowed hard. "I never told you everything. I thought you wouldn't believe me." She turned toward me, her expression gentle and sad. Sometimes grown-ups forget how deeply kids feel things, or they just don't want to believe something could be wrong, especially so close to home. But I believe you, Emily. I should have listened better. I'm sorry we didn't protect you the way we should have." Her words settled something inside me. Not a full healing, but a stitch. Years have passed since that summer, but I still think about him, about the man who watched me from behind those spray-painted windows. That experience left a mark on me. Not just fear, but caution. It sharpened something in me. I trust my instincts now, because I learned that danger doesn't always come roaring in like a storm. Sometimes it waits in the quiet. Sometimes it knocks softly, rhythmically on a second-floor window. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak, even if no one's ready to hear you. I never truly thought we'd leave the city, not permanently. It was always something Lucas and I joked about late at night after the kids were asleep. One day, we'd say, when work slowed down, when the twins were older, when life gave us permission. But last fall it stopped being a fantasy. The upstairs apartment flooded, again, Second time in 6 months. Black water soaked through our ceiling. The landlord gave us the same line. We're working on it. Meanwhile, mold bloomed along the corners of the boys' bedroom and their coughs never fully went away. The woman downstairs fought with her boyfriend almost every night, screaming obscenities at 2 a.m. like she wanted the whole building to hear. And then came the shooting. 3 blocks away, middle of the afternoon. A kid got hit. I remember the moment it changed. We were eating lukewarm lo mein on the couch, our boys asleep between us, when I looked at Lucas and said, "What if we just left?" He didn't laugh. He didn't brush it off like usual. He looked at me for a long second and said, "Yeah. Okay." 3 months later, we were signing papers on a modest white farmhouse in a place called Juniper Hollow. Population, 612. The house wasn't much. White siding, a wraparound porch, creaky floors that talked back with every step, but it sat on 5 acres of quiet, open land. No sirens, no car alarms, just the wind shifting through the tall grass and a distant line of trees swaying like an exhale. It felt like a place people were meant to grow old in. Juniper Hollow was the kind of town you'd miss if you blinked. A single diner, a gas station, a feed store that sold homemade jam by the register. People waved as they passed, even if you were a stranger. Especially if you were a stranger. The first few weeks were bliss. The twins stayed out till dusk, shoes muddy and cheeks flushed. I'd wake early, drink coffee on the porch, and spend my mornings pulling weeds from the garden. We painted the living room together, hung our wedding photos on the staircase wall. For the first time in years, things felt still. Settled. Then I met Harold. It was a crisp March morning, the kind where the frost melts just enough to wet your shoes. I was heading back from the mailbox when I spotted him across the road. He was kneeling in his yard, trimming the flower beds with a pair of garden shears, old-fashioned ones, the kind that click when they close. He stood as I passed, tall and lean, hair thick and silver, slicked back like he was headed somewhere important, but his face, it didn't match the hair. It was younger. Too young. "Morning," he called out, his voice clear, almost formal. "Good morning," I replied, giving a little wave. "You must be the city folks bought the Miller place." "That's us," I said, smiling. "I'm Claire." "Harold." He walked across the gravel road with long, deliberate strides and offered his hand. His grip was firm, the kind you don't forget. His eyes, icy blue, steady, studied me a little too long. "Been out here my whole life. Lot of folks around here are family one way or another. My daughter lives just down there." He gestured down the road. "Nephew's right next to you." He nodded at the house, then back at me like he was mentally cataloging something. Later that night, when I told Lucas about him, he blinked. "Harold? He's 82. I stared at him. No way. He looks, I don't know, late 50s maybe? Lucas shrugged. Small town genes? He meant it as a joke. I didn't laugh. Harold showed up again a few days later. I was crouched near the barn, weeding out the flower bed along the side, when his shadow stretched across the grass. "Just so you know," he said, no greeting, no smile. "You ought to mow the yard every 5 days. Keeps the place from looking wild." I looked up, shielding my eyes. "Oh, yeah, sure. The front yard, definitely. But the back's hay. We're letting it grow out for a late spring cut." He didn't respond right away, just stared at me with that unreadable face, then gave a tight smile. Still, best to keep things neat. He lingered, and I could feel him choosing his next words like he was testing the weight of them. "If there's anything you need," he said slowly, "send your husband over, or call my wife." I blinked. "Sorry?" "Just in general," he said, voice flat. I forced a laugh, unsure what he meant. Like if we need tools or something? He didn't answer. His eyes moved over me, not leering, not sexual, but assessing. Like I was a part he was deciding whether to replace. "You'd look more motherly if you grew your hair out." My face flushed hot. "Excuse me?" But he was already walking away, back toward his side of the road. That night I told Lucas. He chuckled, shrugged it off. That's just small town stuff, Claire. He probably thinks he's being neighborly. I tried to believe that. I wanted to. A week later, Harold's daughter Maggie stopped by. She'd always seemed sweet when I saw her outside, soft-spoken, hair pulled back neatly, hands always in the dirt. She invited me over for tea, said it'd be nice to chat. Her house was warm with a low ceiling and the kind of clutter that says someone's lived there forever. Potted plants in every corner, the smell of cinnamon and clove. We sat at her kitchen table sipping tea and talking about nothing. Gardening, school options, the weather. Her tone was pleasant, her smile consistent, but something felt off. Like she was playing a part she wasn't sure she believed in. Halfway through our chat, her phone rang. "Sorry, just a sec," she said, excusing herself and disappearing down the hall. I sat alone, the ticking clock suddenly loud. A minute passed, then 2. I stood, stretched, and glanced toward the hallway. At the very end was a door. It didn't match the rest of the house, too new, too clean, reinforced. And it had 3 deadbolts running down the side. The paint around the doorframe was different, brighter, less worn. Too new for the rest of Maggie's cozy lived-in home. But what stopped me weren't the bolts or the mismatched trim. It was the scratches. Deep, ragged gouges along the lower half of the wood, like something had tried to claw its way out. I stepped closer, instinctively, my breath catching. "Just storage," Maggie's voice rang out behind me, too loud, too cheerful. I turned. She was already in the hallway, hands clasped in front of her, smile too wide, too polished. "Old root cellar, not really safe down there." She ushered me gently but firmly back toward the kitchen before I could ask anything else. I didn't push, but something in me itched. That night, I walked past her house on my way to check the mailbox. I hadn't planned to stop, I just looked. Just a glance. One of the basement windows was visible near the side of the house. Small, rectangular, barely above the dirt line. There was a handprint on the glass. Not a smear. Not some vague smudge. A handprint. Full, clear, pressed flat. Small, child-sized, fresh. I stared at it for a long time, heart thudding louder with each second. It hadn't rained. There was no dirt, no streaks, no evidence of cleaning. Just that one perfect handprint, like someone had leaned into the glass and stayed there a while. When I told Lucas, he shrugged it off. Probably one of her grandkids. Maybe she was washing windows. But it wasn't smudged, just clean. Too clean. He tried to reassure me, but his voice lacked conviction. I knew he didn't fully believe it either. A few nights later, the twins woke us up crying. Lucas went to check on them, then came back pale. "Come look at this." There were fresh tire tracks cutting through our back field, deep ruts leading straight to the barn. Neither of us had driven there. No neighbors admitted to it. Lucas checked the outdoor cameras we'd installed after moving in. Nothing. Not even a corrupted file. Just empty gaps where footage should have been, like it had been cleanly, deliberately erased. He replaced the SD card and set up backups. He didn't talk much the rest of that night. The final straw came on a breezy afternoon, the air thick with pollen and heat. I was hanging laundry on the clothesline, clothespins in my mouth when I felt it. That unmistakable sensation, prickling, heavy, like someone's eyes were on me. I turned slowly. Harold stood at the edge of our property. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. Just stared. Then, without moving from his spot, he lifted a long arm and pointed toward the tree line. "Don't dig there," he said. Then he turned and walked away. I hadn't planned to dig. Not until he told me not to. The next afternoon, while Lucas was in town and the twins were down for a nap, I grabbed the shovel. I walked to the edge of the field, to the exact spot Harold had pointed. The ground was softer there, sunken slightly. I dug. 6 inches down, the blade hit something solid. A rusted metal box. My pulse roared in my ears as I pulled it free, hands shaking. I pried the lid open with a garden trowel. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, curled, brittle, black and white. Each one showed a family, mothers, fathers, children posed in front of our house, spanning decades, different clothes, different eras, but in every photo off to the side, always slightly out of focus, Harold, looking exactly the same face, same posture, same eerie, unreadable expression. I sat in the grass, flipping through them, unable to move. Time collapsed around me. When I could breathe again, I gathered the photos and crossed the road to his house. My hand trembled as I knocked. A small woman answered, hair gray and tucked behind her ears, eyes tired, kind. "Can I speak to Harold?" I asked. Her face changed, just slightly. "You must be mistaken," she said quietly. "No, I held the photos tighter. "I saw him just yesterday." She shook her head. "Harold passed nearly 3 years ago." I stepped back, the world tilting. "No, that's not... He was just..." "I'm sorry," she said, voice soft but firm. "That's not possible." I left in a daze, the photos clutched to my chest. That night I examined them again, one by one. On the back of one, a faded scribble. 1979. Another. 1954. Different families. Same house, same man, same Harold. I spent hours online digging through public records, town archives, forums no one visits anymore. The house had changed hands at least 14 times in 60 years. Almost none of the families had sold. Most simply, vanished. One family, according to a local newspaper clipping, was presumed missing. When I showed Lucas, he went white. He didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. A week later, we tried to leave. The U-Haul we rented wouldn't start. Dead battery. The spare truck overheated before we could reach the highway. The internet cut out. Phones were spotty. I called the sheriff. He arrived an hour later, leaned on his cruiser, looked at our house, then at me. "Some places don't like being left behind," he said. Then he smiled. And it was Harold's smile. That night, at 3:12 a.m., someone knocked on our door. 3 slow taps. Lucas checked. No one was there. But on the porch, nestled between the doormat and the wood slats, was a photograph. Us, standing in front of the house, Harold just off to the side, smiling. It started with scratches. At first I brushed it off, assumed something stupid, like a careless delivery guy bumping a box with protruding nails into the door. Or maybe a kid, one of the neighborhood kids, dragging their scooter too close to the frame. But somewhere beneath the rational explanations, my body reacted in a way my mind hadn't caught up to yet. That low, crawling unease. This wasn't accidental. The scratches were too deep, too deliberate. Someone had meant to leave a mark. Let me start over. I'm Issa Bennett, 24, and up until recently, I was living just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, in a quiet, tree-shaded apartment complex called Wellington Hills. I'd been there nearly a year with my best friend and roommate, Maya Green. She's 23, sharp as a tack, loud in every sense, and unapologetically herself. Her laugh could either charm the hell out of a room or make people wince, depending on their mood. We moved out to Wellington Hills to get away from the city's mess. Rising rent, sirens all night, car alarms at 3 a.m., the whole thing. Our apartment wasn't fancy, but it was ours. 3rd floor, Building C, Unit 305. 2 bedrooms, fake wood floors, a narrow balcony with a depressing view of a half-paved parking lot, and a crooked line of dying pines. Still, it felt safe. Familiar. Maya insisted we get a Ring peephole cam and a digital keypad lock. Her older brother's a cop, so she'd grown up absorbing the worst-case scenario mindset. I used to tease her for being paranoid. Now, I wish she'd been even more paranoid. The first few months were uneventful. Most of the neighbors kept to themselves. A couple polite nods here and there in the breezeway, but nothing more. The Petersons across the hall were the most visible, Nice people. Toddler who screamed bloody murder at random intervals. But they once brought over banana bread, so we tolerated the noise. They moved out in February. No big send-off, just gone one morning, like they disappeared overnight. Their place stayed empty for about a week and a half. Maya and I figured it would be longer. The property manager, some guy named Cal, was notorious for dragging his feet and running strict background checks. We'd seen him straight up reject potential renters for wearing too much cologne. So when we saw the moving truck pulling up early one March morning, we were caught off guard. The new tenant didn't say a word. Alone. Mid-30s, maybe early 40s. Thin frame. Ghostly pale. Always in long sleeves even when it was 70 out. We never learned his name. No introductions, no casual greetings. Not even a nod. Just the soft jingle of keys, or the quiet metallic click of his lock turning behind him. His windows stayed shut, blinds always drawn, even on warm afternoons. Maybe he works nights, Maya offered one evening. A nurse, warehouse guy, something like that. Then why does it sound like he's dragging furniture around at 2 a.m., I asked. The first time we heard it, we were halfway through a horror movie. Ironic in hindsight. It started soft, a low scrape. Long and slow, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. We muted the TV, glanced at each other. Then the footsteps came, measured, intentional, back and forth, pacing. Then silence. Nothing. We tried to rationalize it. Cleaning, maybe? Rearranging furniture? Could be anything. But it kept happening, night after night. Always late. Midnight, sometimes closer to 3 or 4 a.m. Sometimes we heard muttering too, low and fast, almost like arguing, but there was only one voice. We never caught words, just tone, urgent, angry, or worse, scared. Still, we didn't complain. I mean, how do you even bring that up? Hey, sorry to bother you, but could you stop pacing like you're rehearsing a murder every night? Then came the hallway incident. It was a Thursday. I'd worked late and didn't get home until almost midnight. Maya was already in bed. Around 1:30, she got up for water. The light from the fridge hit the front door just right, and that's when she saw him, standing motionless directly in front of our door. No knocking. No moving. Just standing. Hi? She said, her voice cracking slightly. Nothing. Not even a glance in her direction. He just stood there, as if he hadn't heard her. Then slowly, like something out of a dream, he turned and walked back to his own unit without a word. The next morning she told me over coffee, trying to laugh like it didn't rattle her. But her eyes were puffy from not sleeping and she kept gripping her mug like it was anchoring her to the earth. I pulled up the ring footage. There he was, 3:14 a.m., standing still as stone. 4 whole minutes, just staring directly into the peephole, not moving, not blinking. That's when the alert started. Motion detected at your door, the app would chime between 1 and 3 a.m., sometimes once a night, sometimes more. Every time, sometimes twice a night. The Ring app kept pinging with alerts, and every clip showed the same thing. Him. Walking slowly past our door, head low, feet dragging like he wasn't entirely sure where he was going. Sometimes he stopped, just stood there. Other times he'd reach out and wrap his fingers around the doorknob. Just hold it, not turn it, just touch, like he was waiting for something. Once we caught him crouched down, speaking into the keyhole. We muted the audio and leaned in. Dread thick in the room. His voice, raspy, cracked, whispered broken nonsense. We couldn't make out the words, but it wasn't gibberish. It was intentional, directed. That night, Maya started sleeping with pepper spray under her pillow. I put the old metal bat from high school softball next to the bed. Neither of us said it aloud, but we both knew. We didn't feel safe anymore. Then came the scratches, deep, angry gashes carved into the front door, wide arcs like someone had taken a key or a blade and dragged it across the paint over and over until the raw wood underneath bled through. Not once, not twice, over and over. We went to the leasing office the next morning, Maya gripping the printed photos in her shaking hands. They barely blinked. The woman at the desk gave a customer service smile, said they'd make a note of it, and promised to check the hallway cameras. 2 days later, we found out the hallway camera hadn't worked in months. I offered the ring footage. Clear as day, time-stamped, HD, the guy loitering at our door, touching the knob, whispering, vandalizing property. They asked, "Did he do anything illegal?" We showed the videos. Her tone changed only slightly. "Let us know if anything else happens." When we got back to the apartment, Maya slammed the door so hard a photo fell off the wall. "They won't lift a finger until he stabs one of us through the damn mail slot," she snapped, voice sharp with fear and rage. We tightened security the only way we could. Double-locked the door, wedge a chair under the knob each night, left the hallway light on until sunrise. We even moved the dresser in front of our shared bedroom door, just in case. Then came the night. Tuesday, 1:37 a.m. I remember because I'd just finished a late-night call with my sister. We were laughing about old exes and trading dumb horror stories from college. Maya had dozed off beside me on the couch, TV still playing softly. Then, bang, bang, bang. I jumped so hard my phone hit the floor. Maya jolted awake, heart racing, eyes wide. The door was shaking in its frame like someone was trying to break it down. My hands were slick with sweat as I fumbled for my phone and opened the Ring app. He was there, pressed against the peephole. Shirtless, eyes wild, rimmed red, face right up against the lens like he could see us through it. Then he whispered, mouth barely moving, slow, intentional. We couldn't make out the words, but it was for us, a direct message. Then he screamed, a piercing, animalistic shriek that made my vision tunnel. Not human, not even close. A sound that didn't belong in a hallway. I called 911. The dispatcher was calm, eerily so, like she'd done this before. "Hide, stay quiet, don't engage," she instructed. We dragged the dresser back and huddled behind it in our bedroom, trying to breathe quietly. Maya was shaking, pepper spray clutched in both hands, whispering, "Please go away, please go away." Over and over, 10 minutes, then 20. The banging stopped. The silence after was worse. The police showed up, 34 minutes. After I called, by then the hallway was empty. No sound, no trace. They knocked on his door, tried the handle. Nothing. "He's not answering," one officer muttered. "He's unstable," I said, louder than I meant to. "You saw the footage. He screamed through our door." "Maybe," the other officer replied, tone neutral. "But he didn't technically break the law tonight." That was it. When they left, Maya didn't say a word. She walked straight to her room, got on her knees and pulled her suitcase from under the bed. We packed in silence. No plan, no sleep, just threw what we needed into bags and left before the sky even turned gray. We drove to Maya's aunt's house 2 towns over, filed another police report from there. Didn't matter. No charges, no follow-up. Leasing office gave us a hollow, "We'll look into it." The apartment stayed occupied. We never heard his name, never got a reason, never found out if someone else had filed a complaint or if we were the only ones he focused on. But this much I know. We chose to leave. We didn't stay until it made the news. We didn't wait until our fear was validated by blood. We didn't tell ourselves we were overreacting. We listened to that quiet, primal voice in our gut. The one that told us, this isn't weird, this is dangerous. And maybe, just maybe, that saved our lives. I never planned on coming back to Elmbridge, but after a brutal breakup and a soul-sucking job that eventually chewed me up and spat me out, I needed somewhere to land. My parents had moved to Arizona last fall and left the house to me. The place I grew up in, a creaky ranch-style home nestled between 2 quiet streets at the edge of town. I'd forgotten just how dead quiet it gets at night out here. unnaturally quiet sometimes. It was late June, one of those thick, hot summer nights where the air sticks to your skin like syrup. I was in the basement trying to finish patching a chunk of drywall. I'd turned the old rec room into a makeshift office, and figured if I was going to start over, the space might as well look halfway decent. Thing is, I've always loved the basement. It stays cool, even in the middle of summer, and there's this weird comfort in the isolation. Peaceful, or at least it used to be. Hold on, let me backtrack. I'm Ian Harrove, 28, born and raised right here in Elmbridge. After college and a few chaotic years bouncing around cities, I ended up right back in the same house I used to beg my parents to sneak out of. Most of my friends moved away, Chicago, Indianapolis, or just drifted off over time. But the town's old guard never leaves, like Mrs. Evelyn Kane, my next-door neighbor. Mid-70s, sharp as hell, a little eccentric, nosy in that weirdly comforting way. She's always out on her porch after dark, knitting, drinking tea, watching, porch light always on. She texts me about everything, stray cats, weird cars, raccoons in the trash. So when she texted at exactly 12:08 a.m. that night, I wasn't really surprised. Mrs. Kane. Hey honey, just saw a tall guy walk into your basement, thought you should know. I didn't even look away from my monitor at first. I had my headset on, mid-game, zoned in. Me. Are you sure? I think I'd notice. Mrs. Kane. Yep, ducking under your doorframe, tall, thought maybe it was a friend. A friend? I hadn't seen anyone all night, and the basement door is at the back of the house near the old camper I never touch. It doesn't even shut right, creaks loud, takes effort to latch from the outside, and I hadn't heard anything. I muted the game, turned around in my chair. Lights were still on, music low, faint drywall dust in the air. Nothing looked out of place. Tools where I left them, no shadows, no movement. I walked to the stairs and just stood there listening. Not a single sound, no footfalls, no breathing. I texted her again. Me. I'm down here now, alone. You totally sure? She didn't reply right away. I sat back down, figured maybe she mistook someone walking past, trick of the light or something. But then at 12:42 a.m., another buzz. Mrs. Kane. He just left. Me. Left from where? Mrs. Kane. Your basement. Walked out, headed toward the camper. I followed with my flashlight, but he didn't come out the other side, just vanished. I sat up. That didn't make sense. There's nowhere to vanish to back there. The camper sits right by a chain-link fence, and beyond that is a mess of weeds and a slope that drops off toward a dry creek bed. He'd either have to hop the fence or circle back around the house. No shortcuts, no cover. I got up and started moving around the basement slowly. Each step echoed. My Crocs squeaked a little against the concrete. I could still see the dusty tracks I'd made earlier. No other footprints, no disturbances. Nothing to suggest someone else had been down here. Still, I couldn't shake the unease building in my chest. I'm not the paranoid type. I know this house. The sounds it makes, the way it settles where the air drafts in. But something about Evelyn's message wouldn't let go. So I figured, hell with it. I'll just go over and talk to her. Maybe standing on her porch with some tea or lemonade or whatever she drinks will calm me down. I grabbed the doorknob, pulled nothing, it didn't open. That stopped me cold. See, that door never shuts by itself. It swings closed like molasses and only locks if you latch it from the outside. I hadn't even shut it fully when I came in. The padlock was still sitting on the shelf next to my desk. I jiggled the handle. Still stuck. Now I was annoyed. Probably just the humidity swelling the wood, I thought. Old house. Happens. I grabbed my flashlight, went to the narrow windows near the ceiling, meant for light, not escape, but I'd used them before. Awkward, but doable. I popped a screen, climbed out, and circled around. The basement door opened smooth as butter from the outside. Still weird, but not impossible. I chalked it up to sticky hinges and walked over to Evelyn's. She was sitting out there in her chair, porch light buzzing faintly overhead. "You okay?" she asked before I even got to the steps. "Yeah," I said, "but what exactly did you see?" She raised her mug, squinted at me. Tall guy, all black, walked up real slow, stood by the door like he was listening, then just opened it and went inside. "You see his face?" She shook her head. Too shadowy, like he had a hood on, moved like he'd been there before, like he knew the place. I exhaled, rubbed my jaw, then she grinned. "Was he cute?" I rolled my eyes. "Evelyn, come on." She laughed. Sorry, just trying to keep it light." It was close to 1 a.m. now. The night felt heavier somehow. I said goodnight, hopped the fence, and did a full sweep of the house. Every room, every cabinet. Nothing touched. Everything locked. Everything in its place. I pace when I think. Walked the upstairs hallway. Nudged a dish here. Adjusted a picture frame there. Then a bang echoed from below. Loud. Solid. Not a door. Not glass. More like a shelf breaking. Or wood giving out. I froze. Heart pounding. I grabbed the nearest heavy thing, an old brass lamp, and started down the basement stairs. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. The tools lined up neatly, untouched. But when I stepped to the back door again, it was jammed, completely stuck, just like before. Only this time I noticed something different. There was a thin sheen of condensation on the inside of the door's window, like someone had breathed on the glass. The air hadn't changed, and it definitely wasn't foggy earlier. I grabbed a crowbar, wedged it against the frame, tried to pry it open. Nothing. I pushed, pulled, jimmied the latch. Still nothing. That low, anxious pressure was building in my chest. I reached for my phone, intending to call someone, maybe Evelyn, but it wouldn't turn on. The screen stayed black. No Apple logo, no vibration. Just dead. It had been charging all day. I hadn't even used it in hours. It should have been nearly full. I placed it back on the charger, stared at it, waiting for the little red battery icon to show up. Nothing. Just cold black glass. So I sat there in silence. The longer I waited, the more the room seemed to stretch, like time was shifting slightly sideways. After almost an hour, the phone flickered. Battery at 1%. No explanation. By the time it crept up to 50%, I tried the door again, just to check. It swung open, smooth, effortless. That was 5 nights ago. I haven't been back in the basement since. I don't know what Evelyn saw. I don't know why that door jammed shut twice, or why my phone had gone completely dead while sitting untouched. But I do know this. Something was in my house that night. Maybe someone, maybe something else. And if Evelyn hadn't been watching, I might never have known. I was still frozen at the top of the stairs, staring at the basement door. The same door that stuck and unstuck like it had a mind of its own. The same one that somehow refused to open from the inside. My phone buzzed softly in my pocket. Back to 62% now. Working fine. Like nothing had ever happened. But something had happened. I turned the deadbolt on the basement door, slowly, firmly. I didn't look through the small window set into the frame. I didn't want to see anything. I just locked it, turned away, and walked to the kitchen like a man pretending nothing in his house was wrong. I texted Evelyn, just one sentence. "Me. Did you see anything else?" She didn't respond right away. A few minutes passed. Then her reply buzzed in. "Evelyn, he's not in your yard anymore." That should have comforted me. It didn't, because it meant there was someone. I decided I wasn't going to sleep downstairs. I didn't care how hot the second floor was. I turned off all the lights, grabbed a kitchen knife, just in case, and locked myself in the spare bedroom. The ceiling fan clicked above me as I lay down, fully clothed. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought I heard something. The faint creak of a step. A shift in the floorboards. Movement, deliberate and slow, right beneath me. But morning came. Light spilled through the curtains, golden and warm, Everything looked normal, peaceful. For a second, I almost believed I'd imagined it all. Stress, anxiety, too much caffeine, too many creepy YouTube rabbit holes. Then my phone buzzed again. Evelyn. Hey, just wanted to let you know my camera picked up something weird around 3:10 a.m. Looks like someone came out of your basement window. Want me to send the clip? I didn't text back. I called her. Hello? She answered, voice tight. Send it, please. There was a pause. You sure you want? Send it, I said again. 2 minutes later, it came through. I tapped play. The grainy footage showed the side of my house. The camera's night vision cast everything in pale green. At exactly 3:10 a.m., the basement window slid open, from the inside, slowly, carefully. Then something emerged. It didn't walk. It crawled. Low and slow, like it didn't want to be seen. Long limbs bending wrong. Its body folded like it didn't have bones. Like it wasn't meant to move that way. Then it straightened. It stood in my yard. The outline was vaguely human but wrong. Too tall. Arms too long. Head slung too low on its shoulders. Like it had no neck. It didn't look around. Didn't look at the camera. It just stood there, still, for almost a full minute. Then it turned and walked, slowly, toward the back of my yard, past the camper, and vanished into the trees behind the fence. My heart was hammering. I felt sick. I called the police. I showed them the footage. They did a full sweep of the basement, every corner. Found nothing. No footprints, no forced entry, nothing missing. But the window was unlocked. And beneath it, half covered in drywall dust, was one of my old tools. A rusted crowbar I hadn't used in years. Like it had been placed there deliberately. They said it was probably a squatter. Someone who slipped in while I was out. Maybe hiding in the crawl space. They said they'd keep an eye on the area. But I could tell. They didn't believe what they saw. Not really. I didn't blame them. That night I didn't sleep. I dragged a heavy dresser in front of the basement door, locked every window, twice. I even moved the camper to block the back entrance from the outside. Still, around 2 a.m., I heard it again. A soft creak beneath my feet. Slower this time, more deliberate. Then a tap against the ceiling below me. Once, then again, then nothing. I never went back down. A week later, I rented a storage unit and packed up all my tools. I sealed the window from the outside, metal flashing, bolts. From the inside, I filled it with concrete, paid a guy under the table to finish it, told him it was for security. Evelyn moved a few weeks after that, said she wanted to be closer to her daughter. I think she just wanted to be far from my house. I don't blame her. I still live here. I still love my home. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, I swear I hear something beneath the floorboards. I tell myself it's nothing, just the house settling. But deep down, I know that's a lie. Because I wasn't alone in the basement that night, and whatever was down there, I don't think it ever left.